Here we are talking about the Building Outdoor Communities program and the Outdoor Economic Impact Toolkit. And here's the folks working on this, and your narrator today is John Whitehead. And what I'm going to be talking about over the next several months is understanding economic basics of outdoor recreation. And the text for this discussion is Recreation Economic Decisions, subtitled Comparing Benefits and Costs in the second edition. And the authors are John Loomis and Richard Walsh. And this second edition was from 1997, so it's a little bit dated. It's 25 years old, but it still holds up pretty well. So where things are dated, I'll update those a little bit, but most of the text in this book is still very useful for our purposes. So we're going to go through 7 topics: measuring the quantity of recreation, measuring the price of recreation, recreation demand, okay, and how to measure that with the travel cost method and with the contingent valuation method. And then an alternative approach is known as benefit transfer. Okay, and then we'll talk about how to take with these methods. We'll talk about how to estimate economic values with those, and then plugging those into benefit cost analysis. Okay, so to start that discussion off, let's look at chapter 3 of this book, and I'm going to be covering pages 27 to 37. Okay, so the chapter starts off just talking about alternative measures of visitor use. Okay, and this is important for both benefit cost analysis and economic impact analysis. Okay, so there's 3 measures: recreation day, recreation visitor day, and recreation visit. Okay, recreation day is a visit by one individual to a recreation area or site for some recreation purpose. Okay, so this measure is, or this definition provides a measure of quantity where time on site does not vary much among participants, or it's a good measure when time on site doesn't vary much among participants. Okay, so problems with this are comparing recreation days for activities that take different lengths of time on site. For example, camping takes longer than an afternoon hike. And if there is more than one recreation activity undertaken during the day, then double counting can result. So for example, if the National Forest Service is counting picnic days and hiking days, then someone who hikes and then goes for a picnic might be counted as 2 recreation days, even though they pursued those activities on the same day. Okay, a recreation visitor day avoids that double counting problem. So a recreation visitor day is defined by the U.S. Forest Service is 12 person hours of time on site. And that could be one person on site for 12 hours, or it could be 12 people on site for 1 hour each, and all the various combinations of people and time on site that multiply to 12 hours. And the problem with this one is that consumers think of outdoor recreation as an activity or event. Okay, I went hiking today. Okay, it may have taken 3 hours. People don't think of, well, I went hiking for 25% of the day. So, and that, considering that perception, Recreation Visitor Day can understate the quantity of most outdoor recreation days, or at least those that don't take 12 hours. Okay, a recreation visit is on-site use by one individual of a recreation area for any length of time. Okay, and this is alternatively defined as a recreation trip, okay, when the primary purpose is visiting the site. Okay, economists have determined that the recreation visit is the best measure for use in the travel cost method, especially when length of stay is similar for participants. Length of stay being whether it's a day trip versus an overnight trip. And we'll consider the travel cost method for valuing recreation activities later on. Okay, the problem with the recreation visit as the definition is that it's not a good measure of quantity by individuals on vacation trips. So if you take one trip that lasts 7 days and 6 nights, that one trip, that one visit might understate the number of recreation days you engage in. Okay, and it's also a problem for people who visit more than one site during a trip. Okay, so we've got these 3 definitions: recreation day, recreation visitor day, and recreation visit, but they're easily convertible into each other. So recreation days is equal to, or recreation visitor days is equal to the number of recreation days multiplied by hours on site divided by 12. Recreation days is equal to recreation visits times days per trip. And then substituting recreation days into the first formula, recreation visitor days is equal to recreation visits times days per trip times hours on site divided by 12. Okay, so this is important when paying attention to when designing recreation surveys. It's important to be clear about how you ask the quantity question. Okay, and then if you're clear on that, you can convert these in one measure into the others. Okay, the chapter also talks about consumption patterns. Okay, the participation rate, the types of recreation activities, seasonal patterns, day versus overnight visits, weekend versus weekday visits, hours per day, and annual visits. Annual visits is one that I've added to the chapter. Okay, so let's just run through these real quick and give you a snapshot of some of the major results. The book presents some older data, and where I have found some newer data, I have updated some of these numbers. But the numbers that I have not updated are probably pretty similar to back in the old days. Okay, so first of all, the participation rate. Okay, this is from the Outdoor Participation Trends Report, commissioned by the Outdoor Foundation. Okay, and they found that 53% of Americans ages 6 and over participate in outdoor recreation at least once in 2020. Okay, and notice that that's the COVID year, so outdoor recreation, that was the highest percentage on record. In terms of recreation activities, these are numbers from the U.S. Forest Service, and here's the website. If you go to that, you can find a whole bunch of information. It's the data is from the National Visitor Use Monitoring Survey. So in national forest lands, hiking is the most popular activity with almost 28% of visits. And then downhill skiing, I guess this is out west, has about 17-18% of the visits. Viewing natural features, about 9% of the visits. Cross-country skiing, about 8% of the visits. And and then all these other activities have much fewer percentage of visits. There's seasonal patterns to outdoor recreation in terms of hiking. The least amount of hiking takes place in the winter, and then it increases in the spring and peaks in the summer, and then decreases again in the fall. Okay, in terms of day versus overnight visits, this is again data from the U.S. Forest Service. Okay, if you look at their information on developed site visits. So for developed site visits, the day use of those sites is about 88% of the total visits at developed sites. So 339 divided by 339 plus 48 is about 88%. Okay, so most visitation in national forest are day trips, day visits. Okay, in terms of weekend versus weekday visits, here's the weekend participation for various activities. You see that most visitation occurs on weekends. Here's the weekend participation for fishing, biking, hiking, and photography. All of these are over 50%, and 3 of the 4 are over 60%. Okay, in terms of hours per day, okay, here's from the National Forest Service. We've got site visits, day use, developed sites, overnight use, developed sites. And in hours on the right here, a site visit is about 8 hours. 2.6 of that is spent in a day use developed site. Overnight use developed is 49 hours. So that's about 2 full days. And on down. So you can see that visit duration varies for different activities. In terms of annual visits, okay, again from the U.S. Forest Service, but a lot of recreation demand data looks like this. Okay, we have the number of annual visits on the horizontal axis and the percentage of these visits on the vertical. So almost half of all visitors will visit the national forest between 1 and 5 times. And you see a big drop off after that. The percentage of visitors who visit between 6 and 10 times is about 11%. And those numbers are even lower for people who take more visits over the course of a year. Okay, so these are the kinds of things that we'll be paying attention to when we design surveys for data collection.